that, right? Yes? Okay, good.
Welcome.
Hi.
And good evening. And we're thrilled to have you here this
Thanks so
evening.
much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. Now, this is all part of a global launch. I know we've just seen the first episode, but give us a flavour of what we can expect from this series.
Well, again, the one thing that will carry on through this season and hopefully other seasons is the development of the relationship between Jake and his father, Mark. But everything else will be self-contained from episode to episode. Unlike 24 or Tim Crane's show Heroes, it will not be serialized. So all of the satellite storylines will have a beginning, middle, and a conclusion. It doesn't mean that other characters from those storylines can't come back and have a story focus on them. But each episode should have a sense of conclusion, which is really the biggest difference from my experience with 24, and the biggest difference certainly from Tim's experience with Heroes. And the idea that we could actually do a show that would be more procedural was exciting for us. It gave us a fresh start every episode. It certainly gave us a framework in which to work in every episode. That was great. But again, Tim was fascinated with this idea of interconnectivity, and that as much as we have huge cultural barriers, religious barriers, linguistic or language barriers, there is a common thread among all of us, and we are human. There isn't a single culture that doesn't value the family. There isn't a single culture that doesn't value children. And there are common denominators amongst us all, regardless of where we're from, that are really strong connective points. And he centered on this idea around kind of really articulating and illuminating those aspects of humanity, as opposed to the divisive natures that we often kind of gravitate towards.
I'm sure you weren't short of offers for things to get involved in. What was it about this one that stood out for you? How did you first become involved?
Well, it was funny. I was doing a play on Broadway at the time, and I had just finished a film with Lars von Trier's. These were all kinds of things that I had wanted to do during the 9 years that I was making 24. I was going off to do a film with Mira Nair in India called The Reluctant Fundamentalist with Lear Shriver. But they were all small kind of personal projects, very specific things. They didn't have kind of the grand scope of something like 24 or something like Touch does. So the last thing I really had in my mind of doing was another television show. And I was backstage and someone I work with had come to see the play, and it said, look, I know you don't have a lot of time, but when you can, there's a script you need to read, and it's called Touch. And I said, what is it? She said, it's a television show. And I said, well, I have to be honest with you, I don't even want to think about that right now. And she told me who was involved. Tim Crane, the writer, was involved, and Peter Chernin, the producer. Peter Chernin was the chairman of 20th Century Fox when we started 24. And so out of respect to both of those people, I felt required and obligated to read it. And it was around page 32 that I went, oh shit. And I remember thinking, well, maybe it's going to get bad. Maybe they won't be able to continue on this path. It just got better. And the oh shit was really because I had to come to terms with two things, really. This wasn't something I was going to be comfortable in September sitting back watching. The opportunity was just too great, and if 24 had taught me anything, was that we work on opportunity schedule, it doesn't work on ours. And I think I missed a lot of opportunities in my earlier career because I had set specific times that I wanted to do something else, and I was not very flexible. So I had to deal with that, and then I had to have conversations with Tim about what were his ideas for not only the completion of an entire season for the first season, but what was his ultimate goal. Simple questions like, if this ran for 5 years, would the boy ever talk? And he said, no, the boy will never talk. Okay, good, that's a boundary. And so that, well, how are you going to develop the communication level? What are they going to start to understand? and very much like great friends that finish each other's sentences. We start to do that, but it's with physical gestures, and in many cases what we've developed in this first season is I can tell what Jake wants me to do by virtue of what he isn't doing. For instance, there's a scene in the third episode, which is one of the first real breakthroughs, when I think he's run away and I actually find him in the board and care facility, and he's just scribbling down a number, and he's being yelled at by Clea Hopkins and the other people from the facility, and I grab the book and I start reading number 37118, 37118, 37118, and he's having a panic attack. And the second I say, that's it, that's the number, he stops. And he's fine. And so we start to communicate on those kinds of levels. And now we're in the middle of shooting the 10th episode, and the communication is getting even farther. That's been something fantastic for me to play as an actor, but it'll also give you a sense of how their relationship is going to ultimately develop. And the more he starts to understand about his son, the crazier other people think he is. So they become really their own unit. And then if I go much farther than that, for those of you who might actually enjoy it and watch it, so I'll stop.
Because how challenging a role is that though? Because we've seen some sort of intense and emotional scenes there with Jake. Yeah, so how challenging a role is that from that point of view?
It was very funny, and I'll be honest, in the beginning I thought it was going to be really difficult to intimate to an audience what these two people were going through and kind of be able to show emotion without having the words to back them up. And in the beginning, you know, you have Martin saying a lot of stuff, or a lot of things to Jake to kind of articulate what the situation is, and we've gotten away from, we do a lot less of that now. And I have to really credit young David, who plays Jake, with this. He was the first boy that I read with out of about 35 to 40 kids. We read them while I was still doing the play, so I could really only do about 10 a day. And he was the first one I did it with, and I did a scene where I was kneeling on the ground and I was talking to him. He's looking off and obviously doesn't say anything back. And when I would look into his eyes, he would break my heart, and I don't know why, I still don't know why, but he does. And I remember thinking, wow, if all the kids are going to be like this, we're going to find an amazing kid. And so I read the first 10 kids, and after that I thought, no, the first kid was still the best, and then I read the next 10 kids, and I was like, you guys should really think about hiring that first kid. He really still is the best. By about 35, I was like, would you just hire the first kid? The first kid is the one who's going to do it. And there's something about him. I don't know whether it's, you know, and as an actor you pull from personal things. I don't know if it's something that you reminded me about my daughter. I really don't, but it has yet to fail me that in a desperate moment that if I lock it, and he doesn't ever lock eyes with me, but if I can just look into his, I just find him really moving. And he does this other thing that is just completely natural. In his effort not to communicate with me, he still communicates something that I certainly get. And I you know, we had a screening, we had a test screening, not a test screening, we had a preview screening in the U.S. and it did very well. And it was one of the things that was most tweeted about, how much they got from the kid. And we got lucky. There's no two ways around it. We just got an unbelievable young man. And he's allowing that dynamic to be, and it was something I thought was going to be a lot more difficult. And we were actually joking the other day, I have a grandson who's almost 7, his name is Hamish, and he idolizes David. He saw the screening in the U.S. and he comes to the set. He lives about 3 blocks from where we work, and so he comes after school and does his homework there while his mom's with the other little baby, and he just idolizes David. And I thought it would be really funny, you know, coming off a show like 24, and this kid ends up becoming like the miniature David Cassidy, and all of us are just blown off in the background, and the whole thing becomes about this kid. He's that special to me.
And Danny Glover also appears in this episode. He's kind of in a mysterious, all-knowing way at the moment. Do we see more of him in the rest of the series?
Yes, we do. And he plays a really, really important part because Martin, as a father, has been really left to his own devices and doing everything he can, has researched as much as he can. Danny Glover is the only character, that says your son has been misdiagnosed. He doesn't have autism. He's just evolved. He's advanced. And when man first stood up straight, we didn't all do it at the same time. A few people did it at first, and then gradually it evolved and evolved. This child has evolved. He sees numbers and patterns in a way that we don't. He doesn't need to talk. Why should he? And then over the episodes, you realize that this is a theory that he's been working on for years, that there are, in fact, 30 other children around the world like this. There are 36 people, sorry, not just children. And their whole purpose is to kind of just try and realign this idea of the red thread of people who were supposed to be in contact with each other. And we've somehow in our society broken that. Jake simply uses me to do that for him.
You talked a bit about Tim Crane, who wrote this, and there's quite a different way of putting this together, isn't there, with the different storylines going on at once? Was that something else that appealed to you?
Well, I love the global nature of it. And I love the fact that we were staying with the proper languages, and on a very simple level. I mean, it was like being able to travel without traveling. There's a phenomenal number, certainly in the United States. I think only 26% of Americans actually have a passport. So there was something very appealing about being able to show them what the rest of the world looked like. When I read the script, the thing that moved me the most, outside of the dynamic of this father desperately trying to communicate with his son, when that boy is revealed with the phone that's traveled around the world being used as a detonation device on that vest, I was incredibly moved by that. It showed me the desperation of a people in a specific time. And I think certainly in the U.S., I think that's a really important thing to see. And in all fairness, I think all over the world. So yes, that was a huge, that's something that I'm very excited about.
And you were executive producer on this as well, so...
Well, that's just because they didn't want to pay me.
I was going to say, what did that involve?
It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything on 24, it doesn't mean anything. Except when, what do you mean I have to work on Sunday? You're an executive producer? Oh, yeah. It's when they don't know what to give you because you didn't like the fruit basket. It really is. But the responsibility that I do take on for myself is very much like 24. We have a huge influx of actors. We're dealing with turnover of 20, 25 actors an episode. And very much like 24, we have a system of working, and it's becoming more succinct day by day, and it helps for the other actors to have someone to come, to when they come onto our set to say, look, these are our camera operators. He's going to be doing this. He's going to be doing this. The way we work is we'll sit down and we'll read the scene first before we even think about blocking it, and then we'll just start talking about ideas, and then we'll put it on those people. And just to make people feel a part of it, because the turnover is really fast. We do an episode in 7.5 to 8 days. So I try and take care of the actors on the floor, and if someone's got a really big problem with a line or a script issue, I'm their way to get to the writers.
Now we have to talk about 24, of course. How was it leaving that behind? Well, I'm sure everybody expects us to at some point. Do you miss Jack Bauer?
I do a great deal, yeah. 24 was a fantastic experience for me for so many different reasons. I certainly would be sitting here now without it. I remember when 24 opened, most of the articles in the States were like, and I'm sure they were here, Kiefer Sutherland back from the dead. And I was like, wow, I didn't know it was that bad. I'm still working here and there. And then I finally realized, yeah, it must have been that bad. So aside from those kind of obvious things that 24 gave me, I came out of a time when the career that you wanted was Robert De Niro's career. where you did one film every 3 years. And it was a real event. And so we tried to do, all the young actors tried to do stuff like that, where you would just turn down projects because you tried to make yourself an event. I mean, it is so stupid. But what I realized at 24 was if I was going to try and become an Olympic athlete, I would train every day. And 24 gave me the opportunity to work every day. And what that ended up giving me was a kind of confidence as an actor I had never had before. And I noticed it. When I finished 24 and I got to go back on stage and I got to work in other films with other people, it was such a different experience than anything I had had before 24. That that's one of the things I miss the most. And then there was a forthrightness with Jack Bauer that you don't find in many characters. And he was so committed to what he thought was right. You don't find that again. Martin Ball, for instance, is much more tentative. I think equally courageous. I think the parents of special needs children are unbelievably courageous to wake up every day understanding the circumstances are not going to change and go at it with the same kind of energy and love and compassion for their children. It's unbelievably courageous. But he's much more tentative than Jack Bauer. So that was an aspect of Jack Bauer as a character that I loved immensely. One of the things that's kind of made it not so difficult is that you always, in the back of my mind, I have to believe that the powers that be will one day get their crap together and we will make this movie. And in defense of them, it's difficult because the window now between the end of the season of Touch and the beginning of hopefully another season is very small. So we would have to figure out how to make it at the same time.
At some point. Well, let's take questions from people on the floor now. So if you'd like to put your hands up and make your way to the microphone. Just hold on a second.
Hi there. My name's Ben. I think we can all safely say that 24 revolutionised drama. In fact, it probably revolutionised drama right across the board. We can see its mark in so many of our favourite TV shows even today. What are your hopes for Touch?
Well, it's funny. First off, thank you very much. And I thank you from Howard Gordon and everybody else who was involved with 24. I think 24 was part of a revolution in television, I'll give you that. But there were too many other things. You can go back to ER. I remember when ER came out, people were trying to figure out how on earth they shot it like that for the money. It was looking better than certain feature films, and so if you use that at the very beginning, as the beginning of something, and then you take a look at The Sopranos and Sex and the City and The Wire, and the cable was given kind of so much more latitude with what they were able to create, and then the networks realized they had to compete. And 24 just was very lucky to be kind of a part of that. What I think we did, what we were responsible for, was we managed to shoot it in a way that was relatively affordable, that we could actually give a thriller in the feature world to run for its money visually, and yet we were shooting a feature-length version of something in 3 weeks, and so that was really exciting. Those are things, in all fairness, I wasn't thinking of those things when we started 24, and I'm not thinking of those things when we start Touch. Touch is kind of tricky for me because 24 was not a perfect script to me. Excuse me. 24 was not a perfect script for me. There were things that, excuse me, that needed work. This was. And so when you say something like that, there's only one way to go, which is down. And I remember I was very nervous when we were doing the pilot. I'm so sorry.
Are you all right?
No, I haven't been able to have a cigarette for hours. It would be awful if I just died right here. Here's Sophie. It would be a big hit for a week. You think about the story, and my concern with Touch was I thought it was a perfect script, so to not have that be realized put a lot of pressure on all of us. And, it's up to an audience ultimately decide that, but I got to read it before you all saw it. So that's what I primarily am concerned with.
Next question. Yeah, if I can
Hi. When you were working out how to play this relationship with this 11-year-old boy, did you draw on any communication issues that you might have had with your own father when you were growing up?
Not so much from him as I did my own relationships with my children, because I was in that parental role. And the one thing that I did go back to all the time, even though his situation is exacerbated on a much greater level, I don't know a single parent that gets through a day and says, I did it perfectly. We always feel like we screwed up somewhere. We didn't do something right, we didn't communicate an idea right, we were too short. In our conversation with someone, we were flippant, we were this, we were that. My God, the child's 3, why are you talking to her like she's 40? All of that stuff. Martin's feeling that to the 10th hour, every minute, every day. That was where I started. And then a lot of it had to do with David. He just, I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, you'll see it. He has 3 different walks right now, and they all mean something. And he and I have a shorthand, which is so funny because none of the actors know what we're talking about. But I'll look at him and I'll say, okay, we're going to turn, we're going to leave, give him the number 1, and then when you hit that mark over there, move up to the number 2, and then 3 to your room. And he knows exactly what I mean, and they're just different speeds. But there's also a different physicality to it. And so we've actually started to have this odd kind of dialogue between us, which is so minimal, that's worked for us. But he's helped define that too. It was something we found together.
Hi, Kiefer. You mentioned in one of your earlier answers that your young co-star, David, reminds you of your daughter. Can you expand upon that? What did you mean by that?
Well, my daughter Sarah had really big eyes, you know, and she smiled. I mean, she was one of those kids that when she woke up in the morning, like you should just be sitting for her to wake up, and she would wake up and she would look up and she would just smile. I've never seen anybody that excited to make it to another day. And so when those eyes weren't smiling or when it looked like something was wrong, it would just break my heart. I remember I used to sit out, this is like stalker territory, I remember I used to sit out in front of the school just to see how she was getting on with the other kids, you know. Always petrified that I would kind of drive up and there would be that one day where all the kids were playing over there and then your kid was standing alone in the corner. David has eyes like the kid that was standing in the corner. And there were times when I saw my daughter standing in the corner too, and it would break my heart.
Another question on this side.
Hello.
Hi.
Who came up with the damn it line in it? Did you roll your eyes when you saw that in the script, or was it something that you put in yourself?
No, it wasn't something I put in. It's a network deal. Which is very funny because we did a scene the other day where Jake and I are walking down the street and I get a phone call and I start talking on the phone, and as I start talking on the phone, he makes a beeline to the edge of the curb. And I hear a screeching of wheels and I turn around and I see that Jake has almost been hit by a cab. And he needs me to see the cab driver. And I'm talking to him and I'm saying, Jake, what are you thinking? And this man pushes by Jake and grabs the door, and the door hits Jake, and I yell at the man, I say something to the man, and I get to call him a jackass, which is really big for us in those parts. And that's now, I think that's my touch version of 24's damn it, is going to be jackass. Half of our crew is from 24, actually about 3/4, and so they laughed at that. No, it was already there. It's really one of the only expletives you can use.
I'm just wondering if you've been watching the new series Homeland, because a lot of the newspapers now think are saying that.
I'm so sorry.
Can you? Have you been watching the new series Homeland? Because a lot of the newspapers are saying that this is the response to 24, and it's kind of the flip side of that. And I'm just wondering if you had a thought on that.
Homeland.
Well, I mean, Howard Gordon is a writer. It's another aspect of it. I saw the first one, and then it was difficult because I was doing a play at the time, and they had a screening on the Monday night, and I went with Howard to see it. I thought it was great. Been a huge success in the States, and I couldn't be more happy for him. And I think Howard is an unbelievably ingenious writer. But clearly, it's still in the same milieu as that, but I think it's exploring very different ideas and issues, and it's compelling. I mean, it's done very, very well, and I couldn't be happier. But I think 24 is certainly its own thing, and I'm not worried about. I think there's room for everybody, and all of this to kind of exist. Yeah.
Right, I'm sorry to say that's all we've got time for.
This one that was wanted to ask for a while, if you don't mind. Yeah, we can do this last year if that's cool.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Bill? It is now. You mentioned earlier that you'd had some missed opportunities in the past, things that you turned down, and you didn't want that to happen again with 24 and this. I just wondered what the biggest regrets were in your career, or what were the biggest roles that you turned down that you wish you hadn't?
I'll give you a quick one. There's a few. I'll give you two. My Private Idaho, Gus Van Sant film. I wanted to go skiing and have a vacation, so I didn't even look at it, and that was a really big mistake. And I had told myself I needed to stick to my plan, and it was a really dumb plan, and it was a really big mistake. The biggest one was my agent at the time. I couldn't have been more. I had just finished, I think, Stand By Me and Lost Boys and Young Guns, which a few of those were Warner Brothers pictures, and they were getting ready to make the very first Batman with Michael Keaton. And I got a call saying, would you ever be interested in playing Robin? And I said, as in Robin and Batman? She said, yeah. And I went, in tights, the whole deal? And she went, I guess. And I went, oh my God, no. And all I could think of was Superman, running down Madison Avenue in blue tights. And I was like, life's too short for that. No, I can't do that. I didn't realize they were going to make the coolest film ever, and they ended up not having a Robin. But it was just, I was 19 years old. My agent could have helped me out a bit, found out a little bit more about the project, or I should have probably had a meeting. But I was pretty blasé about things like that. Those would have been huge opportunities. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you about your female co-star Gugu and what it was like working with her, and how we'll see her character develop.
Gugu's phenomenal. Well, one of the things that's interesting is there has to be somebody within the show that is the wall that I get to fight against. She certainly represents that with child services and the board and care facility that she works with. But as you see in the very first episode, and very quickly by the fourth episode, I mean, too many things are happening with these numbers, and where Jake is putting Mark in specific situations that actually continually have these kinds of endings. And she has to acknowledge that this is true, and so she has to be replaced. And then another character will come in and be the sounding board for the you're not understanding. And then, so that's the direction that character is going in. They will work together until they can't. And that'll be something that you'll see down the line. Gugu's phenomenal. I mean, she's one of the nicest people in the world. And I think it's slowly starting to get used to Los Angeles. She has an amazing American accent. I've always wondered why the British actors can come over and do the American accent so well, and the American or Canadian actors go back to Britain and have a much more difficult time. But she's phenomenal, and she's been great, and really, really enjoyed working with her. Yeah. Thank you very, very much for coming out, and we'll see you in the bar.